Yep. Well, do you want to know my actual response to all this? I mean, do you want to hear my actual response?
Yes.
See, my actual response, I mean, I'm just trying to survive, you know? I mean, I'm just trying to earn a living, just trying to pay my rent and my bills. I mean, I live my life. I enjoy staying home with Debbie. I'm reading Charlton Heston's autobiography, and that's that. I mean, occasionally maybe Debbie and I will step outside. We'll go to a party or something. And if I can occasionally get my little talent together and write a little play, well, then that's just wonderful. And I mean, I enjoy reading about other little plays that people have written and reading the reviews of those plays and what people said about them and what people said about what people said. And I mean, I have a list of errands and responsibilities that I keep in a notebook. I enjoy going through the notebook, carrying out the responsibilities, doing the errands, and crossing them off the list. And I mean, I just don't know how anybody could enjoy anything more than I enjoy reading Charlton Heston's autobiography, or, getting up in the morning and having the cup of cold coffee that's been waiting for me all night, still there for me to drink in the morning, and no cockroach or fly has died in it overnight. I mean, I'm just so thrilled when I get up and I see that coffee there just the way I wanted it. I mean, I just can't imagine how anybody could enjoy something else any more than that. I mean, obviously, if there is a dead cockroach in it, well, then I just have a feeling of disappointment, and I'm sad. But I mean, I just don't think I feel the need for anything more than all this. Whereas, you seem to be saying that it's inconceivable that anybody could be having a meaningful life today, and everyone is totally destroyed, and we all need to live in these outposts. But I mean, I just can't believe, even for you, I mean, don't you find, isn't it pleasant just to get up in the morning and there's Chiquita, there are the children, the Times is delivered, you can read it. I mean, maybe you'll direct a play, maybe you won't direct a play, but forget about the play that you may or may not direct. Why is it necessary to, why not lean back and just enjoy these details? I mean, and there'd be a delicious cup of coffee and a piece of coffee cake. I mean, why is it necessary to have more than this, or to even think about having more than this? I mean, I don't really know what you're talking about. I mean, I know what you're talking about. I don't really know what you're talking about. And I mean, even if I were to totally agree with you, and even if I were to accept the idea that there's just no way for anybody to have personal happiness now, well, I still couldn't accept the idea that the way to make life wonderful would be to just totally, reject Western civilization and fall back into some kind of belief in some kind of weird something. I mean, I don't even know how to begin talking about this, but, in the Middle Ages, before the arrival of scientific thinking as we know it today, well, people could believe anything. Anything could be true. The statue of the Virgin Mary could speak or bleed or whatever it was. But the wonderful thing that happened was that then in the development of science in the Western world, well, certain things did come slowly to be known and understood. I mean, obviously all ideas in science are constantly being revised. I mean, that's the whole point. But we do at least know that the universe has some shape and order, and that, trees do not turn into people or goddesses. And there are very good reasons why they don't. And you can't just believe absolutely anything. Whereas the things that you're talking about, I mean, you found the handprint in the book, and there were 3 Andres and 1 Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and to me, that is a coincidence. But, and then, the people who put that book together, well, they had their own reasons for putting it together. But to you, it was significant, as if that book had been written 40 years ago so that you would see it, as if it was planned for you in a way. I mean, really, all right, let's say, if I get a fortune cookie in a Chinese restaurant, of course, even I have a tendency, of course, I would hardly throw it out. I read it, and I just instinctively sort of, if it says something like conversation with a dark-haired man will be very important for you, well, I just instinctively think, who do I know who has dark hair? Did we have a conversation? What did we talk about? In other words, there's something in me that makes me read it, and I instinctively interpret it as if it were an omen of the future, but in my conscious opinion, which is so fundamental to my whole view of life, I mean, I would just have to change totally to not have this opinion. In my conscious opinion, this is simply something that was written in the cookie factory several years ago and in no way refers to me. I mean, you know, the fact that I got it, I mean, the man who wrote it did not know anything about me. I mean, he could not have known anything about me. There's no way that this cookie could actually have to do with me, and the fact that I've gotten it is just basically a joke. And I mean, if I were going to go on a trip on an airplane and I got a fortune cookie that said, don't go, I mean, of course, I admit I might feel a bit nervous for about 1 second, but in fact, I would go because, I mean, that trip is going to be successful or unsuccessful based on the state of the airplane and the state of the pilot, and the cookie is in no position to know about that. And I mean, you know, it's the same with any kind of prophecy or a sign or an omen, because if you believe in omens, then that means that the universe, I mean, I don't even know how to begin to describe this. That means that the future is somehow sending messages backwards to the present, which means that the future must exist in some sense already in order to be able to send these messages. And it also means that things in the universe are there for a purpose, to give us messages, whereas I think that things in the universe are just there. I mean, they don't mean anything. I mean, you know, if the turtle's egg falls out of the tree and splashes on the paving stones, it's just because that turtle was clumsy by accident. And to decide whether to send my ships off to war on the basis of that seems a big mistake to me.
Well, what information would you send your ships to war on? Because if it's all meaningless, what's the difference whether you accept the fortune cookie or the statistics of the Ford Foundation? Doesn't seem to matter.
Well, the meaningless fact of the fortune cookie or the turtle's egg can't possibly have any relevance to the subject you're analyzing. Whereas a group of meaningless facts that are collected and interpreted in a scientific way may quite possibly be relevant. Because the wonderful thing about scientific theories about things is that they're based on experiments that can be repeated.
Well, it's true, Wally. I mean, you know, following omens and so on is probably just a way of letting ourselves off the hook so that we don't have to take individual responsibility for our own actions. But I mean, giving yourself over to the unconscious can leave you vulnerable to all sorts of very frightening manipulation. And in all the work that I was involved in, there was always that danger. And there was always that question of tampering with people's lives. Because if I lead one of these workshops, then I do become partly a doctor and partly a therapist and partly a priest. And I'm not a doctor or a therapist or a priest. And already some of these new monasteries or communities or whatever we've been talking about are becoming institutionalized. And I guess even in a way at times sort of fascistic. You know, there's a sort of self-satisfied, elitist paranoia that grows up, a feeling of them and us that is very unsettling. But I mean, the thing is, Wally, I think it's the exaggerated worship of science that has led us into this situation. I mean, science has been held up to us as a magical force that would somehow solve everything. Well, quite the contrary. It's done quite the contrary. It's destroyed everything. So that is what has really led, I think, to this very strong, deep reaction against science that we're seeing now. Just as the Nazi demons that were released in the 30s in Germany were probably a reaction against a certain oppressive kind of knowledge and culture and rational thinking. So I agree that we're talking about something potentially very dangerous, but modern science has not been particularly less dangerous.
Right. Oh, I agree with you. I completely agree. No, you know, the truth is, I think I do know what really disturbs me about the work you've described, and I don't even know if I can express it. But somehow it seems that the whole point of the work that you did in those workshops, when you get right down to it and you ask, what was it really about? The whole point, really, I think, was to enable the people in the workshops, including yourself, to somehow sort of strip away every scrap of purposefulness from certain selected moments. And the point of it was so that you would then all be able to experience somehow just pure being. In other words, you were trying to discover what it would be like to live for certain moments without having any particular thing that you were supposed to be doing. And I think I just simply object to that. I mean, I just don't think I accept the idea that there should be moments in which you're not trying to do anything. I think it's our nature to do things. I think we should do things. I think that purposefulness is part of our ineradicable basic human structure. And to say that we ought to be able to live without it is like saying that a tree ought to be able to live without branches or roots. But actually, without branches or roots, it wouldn't be a tree. I mean, it would just be a log. You see what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
I mean, in other words, if I'm sitting at home and I have nothing to do, well, I naturally reach for a book. I mean, what would be so great about just sitting there and doing nothing? It just seems absurd.
And if Debbie is there?
Well, that's just the same thing. I mean, is there really such a thing as two people doing nothing but just being together? I mean, would they simply then be relating, to use the word we're always using? I mean, what would that mean? I mean, either we're going to have a conversation, or we're going to carry out the garbage, or we're going to do something separately or together. I mean, do you see what I'm saying? I mean, what does it mean to just simply sit there?
That makes you nervous.
Why shouldn't it make me nervous? It just seems ridiculous to me.
That's interesting, Wally. You know, when I went to Ladakh in Western Tibet and stayed on a farm for a month, well, there, when people come over in the evening for tea, nobody says anything, unless there's something to say, but there almost never is, so they just sit there and drink their tea, and it doesn't seem to bother them. I mean, see, the trouble, Wally, with always being active and doing things is that I think it's quite possible to do all sorts of things and at the same time be completely dead inside.